Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Practice of Traditional Western Herbalism, Basic Doctrine, Energetics, and Classification, by Matthew Wood, narrated by Chris Sorensen. Introduction. The Craft So Long to Learn. The life so short, the craft so long to learn, experience difficult to obtain, experiment dangerous, judgment hard. The first aphorism of Hippocrates. Western herbalism was originally a part of Western medicine. In order to understand much of the herbal tradition we have inherited, we need to comprehend some of the concepts of old-time Western practice. The old doctors did not possess the modern scientific technology that allows researchers to gaze upon the exact molecular structure of tissues, drugs, disease lesions, microorganisms, and the human genome itself. Instead, they had to define diseases and medicines in terms of broad physiological patterns, processes, characteristic symptoms, and symptom pictures observable with the naked eye or a few simple instruments. Until 1930, the Western pharmacopoeia consisted largely of plant and mineral substances, which were defined in terms of constituents which are sensible to the hand, eye, or tongue, mucilage, astringent, bitters, and so forth. These substances act on general physiological conditions rather than molecular lesions. Within this milieu, plant medicines made sense. They provided sources of such ingredients in different combinations suitable to different problems and structures of the body. With the change to modern biomedicine, drugs came to be defined according to a specific molecular structure. Herbs, with their less refined ingredients composed of masses of different constituents, became increasingly irrelevant. If they had value, it was because they might contain an ingredient that could be separated and refined to become a drug. The whole herb was no longer valuable in and of itself. In a similar manner, diseases are now defined in terms of molecular structure and change rather than as general processes, functions, or symptom pictures. Thus, not only are herbs ignored, but the entire system of medicine of which they formed a part has also been forgotten. This has made it very hard to understand the old herbal literature, interwoven as it is with an old-time Western medicine which has become irrelevant and been forgotten. Recently, there has been a revival of interest in Western herbalism, along with other systems of natural, traditional, and holistic medicine. Most of these approaches, acupuncture, homeopathy, and Ayurveda, for example, possess a long-standing medical philosophy and system upon which they may be practiced. On the other hand, Western herbalism, bereft from old-time Western medicine, possesses very little doctrine or guidance by which herbs can be related to diseases or parts of the organism. As a consequence, those who attempt to practice Western herbalism are forced to adopt a system from one of these other disciplines or from biomedicine itself. Unfortunately, this causes the medicinal plants of the West to become, as it were, homeopathic, Chinese, Ayurvedic, or biomedical agents. They have lost their unique identity and history, associated with thousands of years of popular and professional use. To compound this problem, Western science dismisses folk medicine as unscientific or even fraudulent. This has caused the demise of traditional healers, if not by outright persecution, then by economic and legal exclusion. By comparison, in China, the folk medicinal applications of a plant are taken as the basis from which research may be conducted, and traditional healers have been encouraged within government regulations. Another side effect of this situation has been that herbs are now described and sold according to advertising based on science. In many cases, the science is incomplete or misrepresentative, but only when a product sounds scientific will people flock to it. Thus, much of the herbal and nutritional marketplace apes conventional biomedicine. If we are to use Western herbs in a holistic fashion, we need to return to the physiological medicine with which they were associated. This is the system within which Western herbalism developed, and its limited restoration allows us to recognize nuances in the Western herbal tradition which are lost when we adopt foreign concepts. We do not need to resurrect the old system entirely, only the most fundamental elements. We also need to bring it up to date. Not all physiological processes were understood in the old days. They are not indeed understood today, but by using the physiological approach of old-time medicine, we can generate a system of medical understanding which is physiologically accurate and conducive to holistic care, that is, cure. Plant medicines, constructed as they are from a broad slurry of chemical components, are naturally suited to the treatment of broad physiological patterns in the body rather than specific molecular lesions. They also cure, that is to say, they stimulate or sedate or nourish or cleanse as required by the case to bring the physiological function back to health and restore self-maintenance and regulation within the organism, that is, homeostasis. The radical concept of traditional folk medicine is that disease is curable, that is, the organism can be returned to self-regulation and health. Most modern people still go to their doctors nursing this quaint folk concept, but are instead treated to the modern theory. The organism is broken, nature is not able to take care of herself, hence science will take care of it through health maintenance. Modern biomedicine does not attempt to cure, but to maintain the organism through artificial means. In the practice of traditional Western herbalism, we will focus on the use of humors, qualities, or tissue states to describe basic, simple categories of pathology. We offer this as a contrast to the conventional view of molecular lesions. Due to the complexity of the subject, there is not enough space to include more than introductory material on the physiological patterns seen in the behavior of the major organs and systems of the body. This will have to await further publication. I am also reserving for now discussion of the regulatory systems which oversee the general physiology of the organism. All these topics can be learned from the standpoint of holism rather than conventional materialistic science. Anyone who masters the terminology in the second chapter, qualities and degrees, will be able to understand the basics of Greek herbalism down to the Renaissance. The whole tradition will lie like an open book before the eyes. Texts, which before seemed baffling or incomplete, will reveal depths not guessed. Likewise, anyone who masters the terminology in the third chapter, tissue states and a few herbal actions, will find the whole of 19th and early 20th century herbal literature lying before the mind as an open book. There will then be no question what the old authors meant, or whether or not Western herbalism can be practiced upon a holistic foundation. The tools we use in complementary and alternative medicine are weak compared to those used by biomedicine. However, they can perform miracles which biomedicine cannot achieve. All of us in the field have seen this. How is this possible? It is because our tools work with one of the most powerful forces available, the energy of life or nature herself. When we look at an animal or person, we see an enormous amount of energy. When thwarted by sickness, this power is blocked or even empowers the illness. Supporting the self-healing power with simple methods like food, herbs, homeopathic medicines, acupuncture, therapeutic touch, mental attitude, and prayer can do wonders that can never be achieved when nature is ignored or suppressed. Matthew Wood, Sunnyfield Herb Farm, January 2004. Part 1. Forgotten Energetics of Traditional Western Herbalism. The Forgotten Language of Energetics. The Green Tongue. In vain hath he made nature if we dwell on our own conceptions and make no use of her principles. It were a happy necessity if our thoughts could not vary from her ways. Thomas Vaughan. It has often been said that Western herbalism lacks a system of energetics. What that means, in short, is a vocabulary for describing energy patterns or physiological and psychological patterns in the body. The point is to express the activities and configurations of energy, qi, or the vital force, call it what you will. Examples of energetic systems include the yin-yang theory of traditional Chinese medicine, the 5 elements of China and India, or the 4 humors of Greek medicine. The use of an energetic system is virtually a prerequisite in holistic medicine. Biomedicine is constructed upon a materialistic interpretation of nature, which looks to molecular structure as a guide. Holistic medicine is founded on the concept and experience that the organism is a functional unit or whole under the directing hand of an intelligent, self-regulating, and self-correcting guiding life force or energy. Since nature in the organism is self-maintaining and self-healing, holistic medicine is further based upon the assumption that the organism can be cured, that is, returned from an unbalanced state to one of balance or homeostasis. As mentioned in the introduction, biomedicine does not seek to cure or return the organism to self-regulation, but removes and replaces broken parts through drugs or surgery. Thus, modern medicine speaks of health management rather than cure, while holistic or traditional medicine speaks of cure, vitalism, and energy patterns. The language is intrinsically different, and in order to practice holistic medicine, or to practice Western herbalism on a holistic basis, we need to learn a new vocabulary. It should be understood that herbs can be used either way, to stimulate the self-healing powers of the organism to return to health, or to artificially manipulate the organism to fit an artificial goal. For example, golden seal can be used in small doses as a bitter tonic to stimulate the digestion and mucosa, removing tendencies to bacterial infection and mucus production, or it can be applied in massive doses as a natural antibiotic to kill bacteria. It contains a potent antibacterial, berberine. The first use is holistic because it increases the health of the organism, while the second is an example of health management because it assumes that the organism cannot get rid of the bacteria on its own, and the knowledge of the practitioner is superior. the use of herbs is not necessarily holistic. Whatever qi or life force is, most of us see it indirectly in its effects. It is the fact that this energy forms patterns that interests us. There are particular patterns to health and to disease. Thus, Hippocrates bids us learn the medicinal art by looking at a man in the bloom of health and comparing him with a man on the edge of death. In order to describe and influence the patterns of disease formed by unbalanced energy or qi, we need a language of energy patterns. A survey of various cultures around the world shows that a simple system of 2, 3, 4, or 5 elements, qualities, or humors forms the basis of diagnosis and treatment in traditional holistic medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine uses the yin-yang system and the 5 elements. Ayurvedic medicine uses the 3 doshas and the 5 elements. Greek medicine used the 4 elements, qualities, humors, and temperaments. American Indian medicine acknowledges 4 to 7 directions. These different terms are translated fairly easily from one system to another. Yin and yang resemble fire and water in another system. The 5 elements of China and India are similar to the 4 elements of Greece and the magical 5th element of alchemy. Local culture, weather patterns, and epidemiology determine the arrangement and number of elements or humors, but they bear considerable resemblance to one another. One further point should be made. The arrangement of elements, directions, or humors into a 4-fold mandala, cross, or square serves an important psychological and spiritual function. The psychiatrist C.G. Jung showed that the mandala was a symbol of wholeness for the psyche. Many of us, when we read about or look at pictures of the 4 or 5 elements, feel this deep sense of meaning and fulfillment. Although this symbol is mythological and spiritual in nature, that does not mean it should be excluded from medicine. Rather, medicine, to be holistic and curative, must include mythic elements to satisfy the soul and spirit. The Forgotten Energetics of Western Herbalism. At the beginning of the chapter, it was said that Western herbalism lacks a system of energy patterns. Actually, this is not true. It is just that this special vocabulary has been forgotten. These energetics still exist. They are inferred in the list of herbal actions which are found in the front or back of just about every herb book. These include terms like diuretic, diaphoretic, stimulant, emmenagogue, aromatic, and astringent. When I first began the study of Western herbalism, I couldn't get very far because these terms seemed so wooden and mechanical. I thought the terms were unrelated to a deeper energetic context connected to the life force, and which could stimulate my intuitive understanding and problem-solving. After many years, I came to appreciate that they were the remains of an energetic system that had been forgotten. There are 2 basic subdivisions of herbal actions, one referring to the tissue state or pathological condition, and the other to the organ or seat on which the agent operates. The first category is composed of terms like astringent, emollient, mucilage, stimulant, aromatic, refrigerant, antispasmodic, antiseptics, and normalizer. The second refers to specific local organs or functions. Diuretic, kidneys, nephritic, kidneys, expectorant, lungs, pectoral, lungs, diaphoretic, skin and fever, febrifuge, fever, nervine, amenagogue, menses promoting, cholagogue, gallbladder, etc. There was originally a third category which described whether the herb raised or lowered, internalized or externalized, thinned or thickened, but this was dropped by the end of the 18th century. A classical reference for these three categories can be found in A Key to Galen's Method of Physic by Nicholas Culpeper. It may not be readily apparent how the word astringent is an energetic term. However, a short examination shows that it does refer us to an energetic pattern. The condition which an astringent acts upon is not a specific molecular lesion or disease in a modern biomedical sense, but tissue which is prolapsed and leaking fluids. Astringents contain tannic acids that contract tissue and prevent prolapse and fluid loss. Thus, the term astringent refers to an energetic category, what the Chinese, Indian, Greek, or Arabic doctors would have called dampness. During the evolution of Western medicine, the old energetic terms hot, cold, damp, and dry were dropped, and in their place, terms like stimulant, warming, refrigerant, cooling, mucilage, moistening, and astringent, drying, were adopted. This represented a movement away from a mythological frame of mind toward one that was increasingly scientific. Yet such terms still refer to general physiological patterns in the organism rather than specific molecular lesions, as is the practice in modern diagnosis. The organ and function-specific terms are also energetic, in that they refer to broad physiological functions in the organism rather than specific lesions. They refer us back to the period when even conventional doctors treated conditions in this manner. At that time, drugs and herbs were more closely related, because both were defined in terms of general physiological effects or local affinities. Now drugs are applied to molecular changes, and people want to ape modern biomedicine by applying herbs in the same fashion. Unfortunately, herbs generally do not work this way. Sometimes they contain enough berberine, for instance, to kill bacterium, but usually their positive effect is based upon a slurry of different chemicals found together in the original plant. The reason herbs are suited to the old-fashioned approach, that is, to the treatment of broad physiological patterns in the body rather than specific molecular lesions, is that they are in fact complexes of many different chemicals drawn together. These combinations come together in the plant, not randomly, but to solve a certain environmental problem or imbalance which assaulted the plant from outside. The chemicals found in golden seal undoubtedly help it to live in the rich, shady, well-watered woodlands of eastern North America where it is native. It is not apparent exactly how that environment resembles the damp, nutrient-coated mucosa of the digestive tract. One can see a sort of metaphorical similarity, but the peculiar slurry of chemistry found in golden seal makes it an ideal tonic for subfunctional mucosa. The very least that can be said is that the taste, a mixture of bitter and sweet, stimulates the secretions of the mouth and thus triggers secretions all the way down the digestive canal. Golden seal is thus defined, according to the list of actions, as a bitter tonic for the digestive mucosa in particular. Modern medicine does not think in broad physiological terms. For instance, stomach ulcer would be treated by the use of an antibacterial that kills the bacteria associated with gastric ulceration. It does not attempt to change the tissue imbalance that led to the proliferation of bacteria at that location. It is not even interested in the fact that there might be a changed tissue condition that encouraged the proliferation in the first place. Consequently, when the person is exposed to the bacteria again, it will again multiply and settle in. In holistic herbal medicine, on the other hand, we would want to change the tissue state that supports the invasive agent. Here, we could hardly do better than to use golden seal, which is almost infallible for the treatment and long-term cure of stomach ulcers. Golden seal is successful not just because it kills bacteria, but because it stimulates increased mucosal activity and secretions, making the stomach tissue more active and less susceptible to bacterial infection. For several hundred years, there has been a bias in Western education against the intuitive approach in medicine and science. Intuition, imagination, and instinct are relegated to art or religion. There it is permissible to use such faculties. While one can appreciate the need for objective observation and analytical study, the use of these methods alone, as if they were the only true measures of reality in and of itself, is an inherently sick and flawed condition. It skews the human organism by rendering obsolete skills and faculties it has always relied upon to contend with environmental and internal stress. As a consequence, we in the West have lost much in the way of our traditional energetic systems. We pride ourselves on education and sophistication, but we have lost the ability to speak about the world as an intuitive experience. Whatever people say they believe in terms of spirituality and religion, what they do when they are sick and in need reflects the true basis of their belief system. For the average person, science and medicine is the answer. Religion is reserved for miracles, not solving everyday problems. In other words, science and medicine visualize and teach us that we are innately separated from our spiritual and, to a large extent, our psychological resources. That we cannot solve our everyday problems through these means, but must turn away from spirit and put our faith in the material world. From a spiritual perspective, this view is not neutral but actively anti-spiritual. It reinforces a completely materialistic view of the nature of life. Miracles, if they exist, and spiritual life, if it exists, are far removed from everyday life. In holistic medicine, we hold up a different view. We are not isolated from life. We are an expression of life. We are part of this unseen force that propels and patterns us in our daily lives. If we can believe in the unseen power of the life force, we are much closer to a real appreciation of the existence and power of the soul and spirit, that is, the psychological apparatus and the spirit which guides us toward a meaningful life. Those who kill the life of the body also, in some measure, kill the life of the soul and spirit. A culture that has lost its folk medicine, or its ability to heal and cure everyday problems with everyday materials, has lost a part of its soul. There is something deeply sick about Western culture. If we are to restore it to health, we need to restore its lost folk medicinal soul. This means that people are going to have to trust their personal resources and make decisions for themselves, rather than being controlled by statistical studies, worst-case scenarios, or the consensus opinion of experts and counterintuitive advice. It also means that we are going to have to restore folk medicine to Western culture. It also has to be
Sample complete. Ready to continue?